My name's Francis and I'm the Community Engagement Officer here at St Peter in the Forest. I'm in the churchyard on a chilly November morning and I'm going to go and have a look at some of the monuments and memorials that commemorate fallen British service personnel, specifically here at St Peter's. So as well as the 13 official Commonwealth War Graves Commission headstones that we have, there are a number of other monuments and markers inside and outside of our church. I've enlisted the help of some volunteers from our congregation and wider parish who have a particular interest or connection in the war graves at St Peter's. So they're going to help explain the stories behind some of the people who are commemorated here as well. The headstone next to me commemorates Sidney George Spall, who died while just 28 years of age of wounds he received while fighting in Tobruk in 1942. Although Sidney's headstone looks like any of the other official war graves across our churchyard, he is in fact buried in Tobruk Cemetery and commemorated by the CWGC there. So this headstone was in fact erected here after the war by his wife Ethel, who he married in 1936. The inscription on the headstone reads, "In loving memory of my dear husband, Sidney George Spall. Died of wounds in Middle East, 10th June 1942, aged 28. Sidney was born in 1914, the son of Thomas and Kate Spall of Leighton, and he later lived at 108 Wood Street and worked as a carpenter before he was enlisted into the Second World War." I find it really interesting and quite moving that not only did Sidney's widow choose a spot that she'd be able to visit and remember him, but she chose a design for the headstone so similar to the CWGC monuments to give also a sort of sense of official recognition of what Sidney had done and what he had sacrificed.
Hello, my name's Francis Downing. Currently I'm the church warden at St Peter's in the Forest. I'm also responsible for the flowers in the church, and part of my duties as a flower head, I have to ensure that we buy a poppy wreath and the crosses for the war graves in the churchyard. This I do from the British Legion. I make sure that they're distributed around the war graves in the churchyard. A very interesting walk, makes me remember of what's happening and what has happened. Remembrance Day at St Peter's. We celebrate on the nearest Sunday to Remembrance Day. We make that our Remembrance Sunday. Years past, we would have our uniformed organisations parading and joining us in our act of remembrance and service. We time our service, which might mean coming in a little later to our normal 10 o'clock service, to coincide with the 11 o'clock silence that we have on the Sunday.
I'm Neil, this is my wife Sally. We live over the road in Beacontree Avenue. In 1941, 3 fire guards that were protecting our area got killed. We found that one of them was buried here and he's got no known family, so Sally and I decided we would adopt the grave. That was in 2018.
Yeah, and this is Edward Manning, who was killed in 1941, and sadly his little boy, who died in 1916, aged 3, he's also buried here, and his wife, who lived till she was 78, died in 1962, so the family is at last reunited, and we just want to keep looking after it really, because he's got no one else to do that. So on the 19th of April, 77 years to the day, the vicar from St Peter's came. We had local residents, local schools, MPs. We had a wartime fire engine came along with all people, reenactors, firemen, all dressed in the proper gear, which was fantastic.
And the wonderful thing was the lady who was 10 weeks old when her Dad got killed, she come and unveiled the memorial, and we're still in touch with her.
She's a Shadbolt. Well,
Yeah,
she's not a
Shadbolt.
Shadbolt now, but she was. So she was the daughter of Shadbolt, who sadly was killed on that day, and she never met him. So she found it quite moving that someone would want to, do this for her dad, who she'd never met. So that was really quite moving.
Right, well, my name's Chris Hunt. I'm a member of the local branch of the Western Front Association. It's the case with all these memorials that some men leave large footprints, others leave almost none at all. But a few we can find quite a bit about. One example would be Hayden Harry Don Gray. Now, he's killed in action in mid-March 1918. His father had been, still was at the time, the head of the Libraries Committee of Walthamstow UDC, and he was tasked with the job of creating what became the Walthamstow Roll of Honour. This was a document which runs to 5 volumes, and you can find it in Vestry House Museum today, which was intended to list, so far as was possible, those men who had served their country in some military arm or other during the First World War. The father, Henry, started that task about 3 months before his son was killed. To give some idea, Walthamstow in 1911, the census tells us there were about 120,000 people here. That Roll of Honour contains the names of 20,000 men who served. Now, there is a definition here which needs putting in to give that some context, which is, what's a Walthamstow man in 1918? Well, they had quite a kind of sensible approach to these things. A Walthamstow man is a man who's born in Walthamstow, a man who lives for a significant period of time in Walthamstow, and or a man who's educated in Walthamstow. Which means, for instance, that Forest School nearby, the old foresters, they're all Walthamstow men, though perhaps they never really knew it.
Corporal Howard Shadwell Whitingham was born about 1883, quite a well-to-do family from the looks of it. While he was growing up and gaining his education, he lived with an uncle for some time on Orford Road. The uncle was a GP. He himself went on to be an architect. With the outbreak of war, he finds himself being shipped out to Egypt. Once he gets there, his unit is dismounted, they lose their horses, and they're sent to Gallipoli, in particular to a place called Suvla Bay, which was the second set of landings, the first having already proved a fairly major failure. And sadly, these ones do too. He gets there on the 18th of August. We know what day he lands. Soon afterwards, probably very soon afterwards, he's wounded in action, and we don't know what the wound is. We can only speculate as to exactly where he's evacuated to. May have been Alexandria, might well have been Malta. The next and the last that we know of him is that in July 1916 he dies in a military hospital in Hampstead. This tells us a little bit, I think. The idea for the forces that you're buried where you fall, broadly speaking, was long established. Culturally, it took quite a bit of accepting back home here, the idea that we were not going to bring our war dead home. But it was moving in that direction. But if you weren't dead, if there was a chance of getting you home alive, even if the likelihood is you're still not going to survive, then great efforts were made to do that. As I say, he ended up dying in a hospital in Hampstead, and his parents were well-to-do, so no problem to bring him home here. But the government also took the view that if a man died in the British Isles, they would pay to have the body moved so that the family can bury it near to home. And you can see from the layout of the grave that initially it would have been a family plot with family headstones and what have you. So this stone won't have been erected immediately after the war, probably quite a long time later.